Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode If You Could Hide to Kolob podcast. My name's Daniel. This is my brother, Clive.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. Yes, another exciting Old Testament one. Well, we're on the Old Testament this year, but yeah, it's always great to get into these old stories and really learn about them.
Yeah, absolutely, Clive. So today we're doing Abraham. So we're looking at, we're in of course, the Old Testament. We're from chapter 12 to chapter 17 in Genesis, and also with reference to Abraham chapter 1, Abraham chapter 2. And then next week, then we're kind of only just in the Old Testament. So there's a little bit to get through. There's some things I want to talk about the origins of Abraham and kind of the world that he grew up in. But Clive, you've got the quote, so why don't you kick us off with that?
Okay. All right. So this is from Teachings of the Prophet Joseph Smith. And he says, "We ought to have the building up of Zion as our greatest objective. When wars come, we shall have to flee to Zion. The cry is to make haste. The last revelation says, you shall not have time to have gone over the world until these things come. It will come as did the wars, fires, and earthquakes. Until the Ancient of Days comes, then judgment will be given to the saints." And this is Joseph Smith speaking of the importance of turning the hearts of the fathers to the children, children to the fathers. And we're always constantly warned that these are the last days. So I think keeping Zion in mind, now really truly understanding Zion as well, for me, it's a bit easier to now always keep Zion in mind.
Awesome. Okay, Clive, well, let me give a little bit of a background of the world that Abraham is growing up in. The main people with influence over his surroundings is Noah's sons. So Noah's sons separate the land. They covenant with each other that they'll kind of keep themselves to themselves, and they'll go about with their land. And it was quite large, a large bit of land. So they must have known the area quite well. Well, we get to this point where they're all having wars with each other. Their covenant that they made with their father is forgotten, and they're at war, and they're at the point where they've decided that they've strayed so far from the gospel that they're going to create idols, and they enter into this idol worship. A couple of things that I wanted to read out here. The sons of Noah began to war on each other, to take captive and to slay each other, to shed the blood of men on the earth, to eat blood, to build cities, walls, towers, it talks about. And then it says as well that they made molten images for themselves, and they each worshipped the idol, the molten image which they had made for themselves. They began to make graven images, unclean statues. Malevolent spirits assisted and seduced them in committing transgression and uncleanliness. So there is this history that we have here of this world that Abraham is introduced to. So I find it very interesting. And then in the book of Jubilees, there's a verse here that matches Genesis 11:29. Abraham and Nahor took them wives. The names of Abraham's wife was Sarai, and the name of Nahor's wife, Milcah, the daughter of Haran, the father of Milcah, and the father of Iscah. So this is exactly the same as written here in the book of Jubilees. It takes us through the lineage. And in the 7th year of this week, she bore him a son, called him Abram by the name of the father of his mother, for he had died before his daughter had conceived a son. So we've got this history of what's happening with Abraham. He is married. He is growing up in this world that is relatively new to idol worship. But nevertheless, there are statues, there's images made, and there are stories associated with the idols that are created. And so we see Abraham grow up in this world.
Yeah, it's good that you mentioned that because so Abraham is about 10 generations from Noah. It's about 400-ish years. And you got to remember, after Noah tried to create peace, but then the Tower of Babel, as we talked about last week. And when the languages were confounded, there's no doctrine saying, and they turned their hearts to the Lord. So you just got to assume that they continue to be wicked, like you said, and now they just can't speak to each other. But now they're deciding, okay, well, this is what we're going to do here, and this is what we're going to do here. And this is where really opinions of doctrine and things, they just all spread out and go, okay, well, this is the language we're going to do, and this is our understanding of where to turn from here. And it's interesting, isn't it? That they all turn to a deity of some kind. They don't go, oh, that's it, no more God. I mean, it's possible there's some atheists out there, but they all go, well, there's a deity, there's some kind of God out there. Let's worship this and let's create this idol. And oh, the sun was here, so it must be a god's son and all this sort of stuff. So it's interesting that the progress that they think they've created, but really they've gone the opposite way of the way that Noah planned everything out to be. Also, something else that's funny to look at is Abraham chapter 1. The very first facsimile is a guy being sacrificed, and the very first thing Abraham says was, I, Abraham, sir, is needed for me to obtain another place of residence. So I just think every time I read it, I always think that's really funny. You look at it and go, well, obviously, you're about to be killed.
Clive, so I thought about this, and I've scoured the Apocrypha like I really like doing. And where it says us here that, as you've quite rightly said, Abraham 1, chapter 1, he says, I, Abraham, saw that I was needful for me to obtain another place of residence. So I've come across these verses in chapter 11 of Jubilees, in verse 17, and this is about Abraham, or Abram as his name is still. Talks about that he began as a child to understand the errors of the earth, and how far astray they had gone. And he began to pray to the Creator of all things that he might save him from the errors of the children of men, and that his portion should not fall into error after uncleanliness and vileness. So he is really aware from a young age of how bad things are. He begins to pray. It talks here that he has this episode, Clive, when he was 14 years old, where he commands these ravens to not come down, which is quite a strange story.
The raven story is actually very important. It's only one small minor detail, but it's actually quite significant.
Don't you find it quite a strange story, though?
I guess on the surface it's a strange story, but it's actually very, very important.
Well, shall we? I mean, so the ravens, the ravens in the Book of Jubilees is early on in the chronological order. It's actually quite early on in terms of what happens after and the life of Abraham.
Yeah, because later in life, something similar happens again. Animals come and attack the sacrifice that he's got, and he shoos them away. But it's like a symbol, and he understands the symbol from the very first time that happens.
Abraham confronts his father and says, "What are you doing, worshiping these idols? You're bringing shame upon us." And then there's a story about Abraham burning a house down, which I also found quite interesting. So there comes to a point where Abraham is now married. So we've read that in Genesis chapter 11. And the story goes here in this, and in the 60th year of the life of Abraham, that is, in the 4th week, in the 4th year thereof, Abraham arose at night and burned the house of the idols. And he burned all that was in the house, and no man knew it. And they arose in the night and sought to save their gods from the midst of fire. And Haran tried to save them, but the fire flamed over him, and he was burned in the fire, and he died in Ur of the Chaldees before the father Terah, and they buried him in the Ur of Chaldees. So Abraham, when he's 60, he is trying to explain it. He has a run-in with his dad. He tells his dad, "What are you doing worshiping these idols? This is the wrong thing to do." And then he takes it upon himself to burn this place down that is full of these idols. And in doing so, Haran actually dies as a consequence of this, of him trying to go in. He goes in, he tries to save the idols, but he can't, and he dies. I found this very, very fascinating because if I think about what I know about Abraham, clearly he is at a point where he's trying his hardest for these people to not worship idols, and he's actually finding frustration, almost like a personality coming out of what Abraham might have been like. But he's finding frustration and thinks that he needs to take it into his own hands. And if he burns these things down, then there will be there'll be none to worship, because he says, well, he thinks as soon as they're gone, there's nothing else that they can worship. Like I said, he burns them. I found that story, yeah, really, really fascinating.
Yeah, I do think it shows the character of Abraham, because Abraham, he's not just a guy. Like, you read his story and you go, okay, well, he was going to be sacrificed. Then he decided to leave and he took his family with him, and then there was Lot, and there's all that story. But to understand why Abraham was chosen over just another good guy, I think that shows it. He not only went against his father and said to his father, no, this is wrong, and then took it into his own hands about what he was going to do. You know, he really pursued the case. He even took his father, when he left, he took his father with him. Like, this is Abraham, the man that goes, I am going to do these things. I haven't been called or anything, but this is just something that I feel like I should do. There's so much surrounding me. You know, there's so much around Abraham at this time that he could definitely fall away easily. His family are against him, but he doesn't. He actually goes, I am going to stick to my guns. You know, it reminds me of Dan in the Old Testament as well. You know, he just sticks to his guns and says, well, I'm going to do what I know is right, no matter all of those around me. And that, I think, is really what the sacrifice that he shows to the Lord, for the Lord to say, well, you're going to be called, and all of these things are going to come to pass because of you.
So I guess it links. So when he says he takes his brother's son, when he takes Lot with him, he's taking Lot with him because Lot doesn't have a dad anymore. His dad died in this fire.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Just something I want to mention real quick. If you are reading along, and we're going the book of Abraham and Genesis, and it sort of intermingles. And Abraham is called Abram, as Daniel mentioned, but in the book of Abraham, he calls himself Abraham. But we know that his name is Abram at this point. So just for the understanding of that, I just want to point out, the book of Abraham is from his perspective. He's writing it down. I, Abraham, did this, and Abraham did that. Where in Genesis, this is Moses looking back at the life of Abraham and writing his story in an order. And so then his name was Abram, but now in the book of Abraham, he's writing it firsthand saying, I, Abraham. So I just want to clear that up before we continue.
Yeah, that's right. And his wife as well would end up being called Sarah. They both are patriarch and matriarch of this society. So they both go through a name change. And Abraham's really, really important to lots of religions. You know, certainly he is the founder of Judaism, Islam as well. So there is a lot. Abraham is very, very significant for the world, Christian and non-Christian.
That's exactly right. And I was actually going to bring that up next week, but I'll bring it up now. Everyone up to Abraham is the same. But like you said, Islam. So we'll talk about Isaac and Ishmael. Islam follows Ishmael's line. Christianity follows Isaac's line. And so that's where everything starts to split off again. So talk about an original splitting off. This is like a new world splitting off. They follow one line, we follow another. So Abraham really is that center point where everyone can agree upon.
Exactly. So Clive, just the last couple of things from the Book of Jubilees. Abraham is at a point here where the fire has occurred. He's sitting alone, and then he says this prayer: "My God, God Most High, you alone are my God. I have chosen you in your dominion. You have created all things." And he ends up having this initial prayer, and he communicates with the Lord, and is set off on this prophetic journey to try to convince people that idol worship isn't right, and that they should be thinking about Jesus Christ.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So, all right. Well, I'll just briefly tell a little bit of the story of the Book of Abraham, chapter 1 and 2. So, Abraham, as we mentioned, he goes to be sacrificed, and he prays to the Lord, and the Lord looses his bands, very much like what Nephi, we talked about a couple of years ago in the Book of Mormon. Nephi, same thing. He's bound up, and the Lord loosens his band once he prays. he turns to his father, tries to teach his father about the truth to get his father to turn away. And his father did for a little period of time, which we'll talk about, and then he turns away again. But also, important to note that there's also 3 virgins that are offered up to be sacrificed because they didn't want to worship these false gods. And so there's sacrifices. It's not just Abraham wasn't a single sacrifice. There was many, many happening all throughout. And so this is when now Abraham, like Daniel said, this is sort of where it gets its prophetic call. Something really interesting, Daniel, in verse 20, that I just want to bring up. It says, behold, so this is, Abraham cries out to the Lord and the altar is broken, but I'll read it. Behold, Potiphar's hill was in the land of Ur of Chaldea, and the Lord broke down the altar of Erchna and the gods of the land, and utterly destroyed them, and smote the priest that he died. And there was a great mourning in Chaldea, and also in the court of Pharaoh, which Pharaoh signifies the king of royal blood. Now, why is that interesting? Well, Potiphar's hill is so far away from where the Pharaoh was. In fact, it's 20 days walk from where the Pharaoh is. So for the Pharaoh to receive that information, and I'll read this here. This is by this is Elder Mark E. Peterson. He wrote this. He said, when the scripture says that the Lord broke down the altar of the gods of the land, it must have been a broad percussion, because it brought great mourning in Chaldea, and also in the court of Pharaoh. Pharaoh, his court was in Egypt, almost an unusual event. Only an unusual event could have caused such extreme and distant reactions. Abraham's brief account obviously does not tell the whole story. So you told us a bit of a story there about the burning of it down, but there must have been so much more to it that we just don't know. For it to reach that far, for the priest to go, wow, something big and significant has happened. That's an important story. So there's a couple of things as we read today that can be really overlooked, but if you really look into it, there's quite important information in there.
Yeah, and it's hard to be reading so much and go, okay, well, chronologically, where are we up to? Where does this bit fit in? Where does that bit fit in? And so trying to tie those things together can actually make it quite a complicated story.
I agree. It's so hard to keep up. And because there is such little things, you go, well, what is it important for me to focus on?
Yeah.
Should I be focused on this bit or this bit? And yeah, there's a lot to it. One thing to mention is Egyptus being discovered by Egypt discovered by a woman who was the daughter of Ham. Her name was Egyptus. And what's interesting is that Egypt was underwater. And I talked about last week how I watched that National Geographic about Tower of Babel and about the Noah and the flood. The one part does talk about quite significantly about how Egypt was absolutely covered in rivers, and there was people would have all these offshoots of different rivers connected to their land so they could farm. It's really interesting because it's proof that the Book of Mormon is true, even though, again, we're not looking for the proof because everyone who's listening generally understands that it's true. But it's just really interesting how everything all lines up. There's no way Joseph Smith would have known that translating the book of Abraham. So it's just really fascinating how everything always lines up.
Do you want to stay on Abraham or do you want to go to Genesis?
I just want to talk about the importance of the priesthood. In Abraham chapter 1, verse 27, now Pharaoh, being of that lineage of which he could not have the right priesthood, notwithstanding the Pharaohs would fain claim it from Noah, though through Ham, therefore my father was led away by that idolatry. It's so important to note here that we talked about last week, how because of Ham's lineage and the things that happened to him, they weren't allowed to have the priesthood. So like it says there, they feigned it. So all of these idol worships, all of that is them trying to imitate the priesthood. Well, we don't have the priesthood, but let's make out that we do. And here's how we're going to adjust things and make things work to us. And this is how Abraham's father fell under that. Well, I want the priesthood. And they're like, well, we've got it. I promise we've got it. And this is how we're going to use it. So again, it's important here to know that they didn't have the priesthood, but they claimed to. And that's where I feel like that's really the stepping stone to apostasy. we want the priesthood. Well, let's say we've got it, and then everything else just follows on because it just veers straight off the path.
Yeah, yeah, I really like what you're talking about here. It gives an insight as well into what Abraham was going through and the things that he was having to deal with in his time. Um, okay, what's next?
Well, I mean, the Abrahamic covenant is very, very important, obviously. And the Lord speaks to Abraham, and I'm just going to quickly go through this because this is chapter 2.
Well,
So,
do we want to get to that yet? I mean, the Abrahamic covenant kind of, again, I'm trying to chronologically talk, trying to get through it. There's a lot that happens. I feel like that covenant comes later. So if we look at the account of Genesis, or you don't agree?
no, I do agree, but yeah, I guess it's more Genesis 12, then back to the Abrahamic covenant, then Genesis 13. Is that how you're reading it?
Yeah, sort of yeah, a little bit in Genesis 13. Um, well, let's finish Abraham and then we can just work on the book of Genesis. How about that?
Yeah, all right. It is difficult when you do it, when, it is spaced out in a way where, because obviously the book of Abraham isn't in the Bible. It'd just be a lot easier if it was. As you mentioned, Haran, Abraham's brother, died. In here, it talks about a famine, but obviously we got more information. So Abraham takes his wife and Lot and his nephew and his wife, and then Terah, like you said, Abraham's father, to the land of Haran. And Terah again then turns to idolatry. And so this is when Lot and Abraham come together and they pray to the Lord. And this is when the Lord gives Abraham the Abrahamic covenant. He also speaks about Lot should take his family and leave and how they should all go like that. But let's talk about the important part of the actual chapter, the Abrahamic covenant. So the Abrahamic covenant is, I've just got it sort of in bullet points of what it is, if that's all right with you. Okay, so his promised land.
Well, do you want to, should we look at the scriptural references?
Okay, yeah, sure. So chapter 2, verse 6, this is before they actually pray, but in halfway through 6, this is where it comes up. Arise and take Lot with thee, for I have proposed to make thee a minister to bear my name in a strange land, which I give unto thee and thy seed after thee for an everlasting possession when thy hearken to my voice. So the Lord is promising all this land, basically the land of promise that is in the Americas, to Abraham. And then verse 9 is posterity. This is the next promise. And I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee above measure, and make thy name great among all nations, and thou shalt be a blessing unto thy seed after thee, that in their hands shall bear this ministry and priesthood unto all nations. So not only is he blessed, we'll talk about the priesthood next, but not only is he blessed to have the priesthood and his posterity forever, but as we discussed at the beginning, Abraham is sort of the end of where we all agree on. So whatever happens after Abraham and the seed spreads, the Lord still has promised him, and it has all across the world. Everyone can agree, or every God-fearing nation can agree that Abraham is definitely a prophet, and then obviously they split it from there. So that's very important to note. And then obviously the priesthood, very, very important. This one, well, I mean, it's in 11, but for me to understand it a bit more, I took the chapter 1, verse 18 approach, where it says, behold, I will lead thee by my hand and take thee to put upon thy name even the priesthood of thy father, and my power will be over thee. So essentially that, God's father, Christ's father, is the power that Abraham will have, which is the priesthood. Do you want to read 10, chapter 2, verse 10?
Yeah, and I will bless them through thy name, for as many as receive this gospel shall be called after thy name, and shall be accounted thy seed, and shall rise up and bless thee as their father.
Right. So, yeah, basically. And then the last one, I think the best one to read it from would be Genesis 13, verse 16. I think it just says it a bit more clearly. And I will make thy seed as the dust of the earth, so that if a man can number the dust of the earth, then shall thy seed also be numbered. So this is basically seed forever. So if we're not born directly under the line of Abraham, we are in the Abrahamic covenant when we have the priesthood, when we're called, we are part of Abraham forever, and we always will be. And so this is the Abrahamic covenant. There's obviously a lot more detail to it, but that is, like I said, it's hard to say what you look into and what you don't. So I think if everyone here would take those points and study those points amongst themselves, I think that's really what the main "Come Follow Me" episode is really about, or "Come Follow Me" teaching in your classes.
Clive, in the book of the Jubilees, that last verse that you just read in Genesis, this is its version. So this is a conversation from the Lord to Abraham. Lift up your eyes from the place where you are dwelling, northward, southward, westward, and eastward, for all the land which you see I will give to you and to your seed forever, and I will make your seed as the sand of the sea. Though a man may number the dust of the earth, yet your seed will not be numbered. Arise, walk in the length of it and the breadth of it, and see it all. For to your seed I will give it. So it's this idea that Abraham is truly going to be at the real patriarch, and Sarah the matriarch of all nations.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that actually, because I keep skipping around of it, but she's so important. We had we had state conference just recently, and we had the general authority there, and he was talking about the importance that he and his wife be unified with everything he does. It's not just his calling; it's theirs. So I think that's an important thing to remember, that Sarah's definitely a major part of it. One thing I will mention as well, also before we move on to the wars, is Abraham seemed, I don't know, he just seemed very excited when he found out all about the Abrahamic covenant, and this is how he expresses himself, I would say. So this is Abraham chapter 2, verse 16. Therefore, eternity was our covering and our rock and our salvation, as we journeyed from Haran by the way of Jershon to come to the land of Canaan. So they're going about their journey. They've escaped all these turmoils. His father's turned away. But after he learns about this Abrahamic covenant, he's eternity is my covering. Like he's dwelling in tents now, but it's like what is happening now doesn't faze me anymore, because I've understood what the Lord has said to me. So it's almost like I've written next to him in my scriptures, Abraham was excited, because it just sounds like he's just everything that he's learned now. He's gone, whatever happens, the Lord is with me.
Okay, Clive, let's go to Genesis chapter 12. There's a couple of things that I wanted to point out, and that is towards the end. Imagine a scene where, well, I'll just read it. This is Genesis chapter 12, verse 14. And it came to pass that when Abram was come into Egypt, the Egyptians beheld the woman, that she was very fair. This is in reference to Sarai. Would you say Sarai? I'm saying Sarai, who becomes Sarah. What do you say?
I was listening to the scriptures on driving to work, and they say Sarai.
Sarai, same thing.
So that's Sarai.
So then it says in 15, the princes also of Pharaoh saw her and commended her before Pharaoh, and the woman was taken into Pharaoh's house. And he entered Abram well for her sake, and he had sheep and oxen and asses, men servants, maid servants, camels. And the Lord plagued Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. And the Pharaoh called Abram and said, What is it that thou hast done? Why didst thou not tell me that she was thy wife? And why didst thou? She is my sister, for I might have taken her to my wife. Now therefore, behold thy wife, take her and go thy way. So there's this story here that Abraham and Sarah were going into Egypt, and they say, oh, well, who is she? And Abraham says to her, well, that's my sister, and doesn't tell them that she is his wife. And the question comes up, well, why is this the case? Why is that happening? And a really interesting book that I've recently read talks about how important Sarah was, and that actually she was noticed, and people knew who she was. And so Abraham has this fear that if he says, well, that's my wife, Abraham would actually be killed or potentially be killed, so that Sarah is then free to marry someone else. So in trying to save himself, he says, well, this is my sister. This is one explanation of why the Old Testament tells us that Abraham and Sarah are brother and sister in a couple of these instances. And okay, so two things. One thing really is, Clive, in verse 15, it says, and commended her before Pharaoh. And this commended actually refers to that they noticed her. They knew who she was. And so pointing out that she is actually far more elevated than what we potentially give her credit for. And notably, the Book of Jubilees also gives this same story. Came to pass when Pharaoh sees Sarai, the wife of Abram, that the Lord plagued Pharaoh and his house with great plague. Abram was very glorious by reason of possession. And so eventually, and Lot also, his brother's son, talks about how wealthy they were. So there's this idea that Abraham and Sarah were actually quite senior in the old world, more senior than perhaps we think, in terms of they weren't just these kind of lowly people who just kind of came up from nowhere, but they were actually senior officials. And Sarah was actually quite an important figure and well known amongst these cities that they went to.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's interesting because, yeah, you sort of look at the story and you go, well, why didn't Abraham, because the Lord told Abraham to say, tell them Sarah's your sister, not your wife. And you sort of go, well, it didn't really matter in the end, but it would have. Like you said, it wouldn't have ended the way it did if he straight away went in there and said, this is my wife.
Yeah, certainly more threatening. Clive, the only other couple of things that I wanted to mention that's happening behind the scenes as well is Lot. So Lot is walking around with them. We talked about Lot's father is dead from the burning, of course. And so, but Lot kind of keeps finding himself in a little bit of trouble. In the 4th year of this week, Lot departed from him, and Lot dwelt in Sodom. And the men of Sodom were sinners exceedingly. And if we go into Genesis 13, verse 13, but the men of Sodom were wicked and sinners before the Lord exceedingly. Now, here is a point that in the modern day world is controversial. Perhaps 50 years ago, maybe not controversial, but if you go down to the footnote, Clive, of the word wicked, the topical guide is homosexual behavior. Now, again, that is quite a controversial point in 2026 and, previous other years, of course. But Lot is going into this city of Sodom where sinners are exceedingly. And then Genesis tells us that one of the main sins in the area was homosexual behavior. So just an interesting kind of footnote that Lot is with Abraham and Sarai. Then he goes off into Sodom, comes back, so on and so forth.
Well, I think it just shows that how crazy the world has turned, that something that was so wicked back then seems to be nonchalant now. But it's funny, though, to mention Lot and why he ended up in Sodom, because Lot and Abraham, like you said, they had a lot of land, a lot of riches, but their herdsmen kept fighting with each other. And so Abraham said, you know what, let's take some land. He said, do you want the lush valley of Jordan? It's beautiful grass out there, well farming, or do you want Canaan where we are right now? And Lot went, you know what, I'm definitely taking Jordan. And why wouldn't you? So he went off there and he pitched a tent near Sodom, like you said, and Abraham stayed. So, Lot thinking that he's taken this well-flourished area, we'll talk about soon, that, yeah, he gets captured and it doesn't really end up quite well for him in the end.
Okay, Clive, well, let's discuss that. So from chapter 14, let's discuss that in a part 2. Let's come back and we'll keep talking about the story of Abraham for this week and this week's Come Follow Me. Thanks for tuning in to another episode. If you could hide to Color podcast, catch us on YouTube and Instagram. Facebook as well. And we will see you for part 2